When we're looking at how the emotions and the brain interact with pain, it's important to understand that the human brain has evolved to focus more on negative outcomes than on positive ones. For our own protection, it was built to always assume the worst. It's biased toward negativity. In his book, Hardwiring Happiness, Rick Hanson, PhD, explains this concept in more detail. Our ancestors could make two kinds of mistakes. One, thinking there was a tiger in the bushes when there wasn't one, and two, thinking there was no tiger in the bushes when there actually was one. The cost of the first mistake was needless anxiety, while the cost of the second one was death. Consequently, we evolved to make the first mistake 1,000 times to avoid making the second mistake even once. The default setting of the brain is to overestimate threats, underestimate opportunities, and underestimate resources, both for coping with threats and for fulfilling opportunities. Then we update these beliefs with information that confirms them, while ignoring or rejecting information that doesn't. There are even regions in the amygdala specifically designed to prevent the unlearning of fear, especially from childhood experiences. As a result, we end up preoccupied by threats that are actually smaller or more manageable than we'd feared, while overlooking opportunities that are actually greater than we'd hoped for. In effect, we've got a brain that's prone to paper tiger paranoia. Most of us can relate to what Hanson calls the special power of fear, because it's been hammered into our unconscious minds for millennia. Think about your daily routine. As you go about your day, if you make a movement that causes you pain, if you're like most people, you remember to avoid that movement for months afterward. If you also do something that soothes your pain or even feels good, you might not remember it as readily. That's your primitive brain at work. In other words, because of how our brains have evolved, negative experiences routinely outweigh positive ones. The psychologist Daniel Kahneman received the Nobel Prize in Economics for showing that most people will do more to avoid loss than to benefit from an equivalent gain. In intimate relationships, we typically need at least 5 positive interactions to counterbalance every negative one. And for people to begin to thrive in life, they usually need positive moments to outweigh negative ones by at least a 3-to-1 ratio. Again, think about yourself. Let's say you're having a good day. You're feeling good with relatively low pain. At the very end of your day, a neighbor says something that upsets you. Do you go to bed that night thinking about what a good day you've had and how much better your body felt? Or do you go to bed that night focused on what your neighbor said? Most of us will focus on what the neighbor said. That's how the brain's negativity bias works. We can even see it in how the brain functions. The amygdala, the part of the brain that gets activated when we're under stress, and also the part of the brain that's involved in emotions as well as physical pain, typically gets activated more by negative experiences than by positive ones. So I'm sure you're wondering what this has to do with tapping and pain relief. What I've seen, and what Hanson also alludes to, is that the negativity bias puts undue stress on the body. When your body is under stress or senses a threat, it secretes the hormone cortisol, which is also referred to as the stress hormone.